So you're online, you're an NSA, you're lockstep, all of that kind of good stuff. Some of the other things that you talked about briefly earlier about we're not exactly a traditional what one would think of as computer science or engineering program. We are a holistic program, and because of that, you teach things like cyber law, and you teach social engineering. And one of the other things that I think is really important that you teach, and I think that many of the folks are surprised that you teach, is you teach SCRM. And you teach ICT SCRM. And can you explain a little bit about what that is? Because I know that that's a topic that's really hot in the government right now, and I think industry is industry as well. And so maybe you could explain that a little bit and how you do that.
Well, I hate to break the news to anybody, but we don't make software anymore, at least not in this country. We integrate it. The software tends to get written where you can pay the programmer 10 cents on a dollar. And that means India or, other kind of countries where people are willing to work cheap. And so most of our software is purchased. I haven't written a word processing program ever. But I use one. And the thing that we're using right now to talk to each other, we bought this. We didn't program it ourselves. There's probably original programming going on somewhere, maybe in Redmond, Washington. But the bottom line basically is that the actual programming work is done in places where it's cheap and still very good. In some cases, India might be better than us in that particular area. But we integrate stuff as it kind of moves up a supply chain, exactly like the supply chain you have if you're making a car, from bottom to top into products. The only problem we have is that it's software. And so the problem with software is you don't know what you're buying. You can't see it. And even if you speak the language, you can't really tell what it is. If you want to read 10 million lines of code, you can't really tell what it is because it's the suppliers don't give you the source code. They give you, which is what you could read. They give it to you in binary because they don't want you reading it. Because they'd be giving away their product. Long story short, it's completely invisible, highly dynamic product that you're basically buying a pig in a poke. And so they have this thing called COTS, commercial off-the-shelf software, which is the industry. And when you talk about all the money and we talk about the software business and all that sort of stuff, what you're talking about basically is buying bits of software, integrating it into some kind of product and giving it to people. If you've got this supply chain bottom to top, you've got all kinds of vulnerability at the bottom of the supply chain because most people don't know what's going on down there. You may have a supplier and the supplier may have a couple of subcontractors, but beyond that, you, the customer, don't have any idea what you're buying. And so when Chinese malware started turning up in weapon systems that the US military was buying back in 2010, Congress went, off the deep end, dragged the Secretary of Defense down to kind of justify why in the heck we were buying Chinese malware. And he explained that they didn't have the slightest idea what they were buying because they didn't know where it was coming from or what it was. That's the situation. And we don't, if I want to kind of get your conspiracy, thing going, we still don't know what is. What I'm looking at right now in terms of you and me might be also being viewed by, I can't think of the name of the president of China, but you get what I mean. And there's no way you would know that. There's no way you know anything about the stuff you've got. All of it's automated, all of it's, computerized, all of it's programmed, and everything in it is put there by somebody else. So supply chain risk management for ICT is different than supply chain risk management for, say, the automobile industry, in the sense that you're moving invisible products from person to person, and you got to trust the guy below you. Do you trust the Chinese? I don't know. I don't. But are they doing a lot of our programming? Who knows? Probably.
Well, we're stuck with the thing where, I mean, for most people, they put out bids, and the lowest bid is the thing that wins whatever contract that we've got out there, right? And so we're stuck with, and then what does that leave us? And how do we know what we do have and what we don't have? And that's part of what supply chain risk management is all about, right? Controlling that. process?
You buy functionalities and moves up the ladder. And the only way you can do that is some kind of top-down process. You're not going to do it on inspections because you're simply not going, don't even know who's doing it. But you can force down a process that says, from level to level, that says, here's a certain number of things you have to be able to do, know, do, and prove when you write the contract. And contracts basically drive supply chains. Most of what's going on in the software industry right now has more to do with lawyers than it does with programmers, because basically the lawyers are the ones that determine how contracts are written and how contracts are enforced. And so if I got a contract with a subcontractor, I'm going to say to that subcontractor, here's 10 principles, which are basically what we teach in the supply chain risk management class. You've got to kind of write into your contract that does stuff like, ability to prove the provenance of an item, where it came from, and, ability to basically do basic inspections and tests that prove that it's not, and ability to document that and all that other sort of stuff that basically we teach as a process. And then we say to them, if you're going to source it down or outsource it, you make sure your people do the same thing. And then you make sure those people do the same thing. And so basically what you're doing is imposing a kind of a security protocol on everybody up and down the supply chain. And you don't need to worry after that, because basically if you're doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of security protocol, you're safe. Now, people can still mess with you. But, that's about as much due diligence as you can get, because otherwise you just got to pray that the folks who are doing the programming and, whatever the Chinese military unit that programs malware are going to not put something in that's going to be particularly nasty to you. And so, like I said, supply chain risk management is the #1 vulnerability in the world right now. Supply chain risk. ICT supply chain risk is the #1 vulnerability in the world right now that we don't know about, and are happily going along, like sheep, with a kind of, we trust you, we love you, and by the way, we're making a lot of money off you, until somebody pushes the button. Sounds sort of like something Dr. Evil would.
Yeah. All you need is a cat, Dan, sitting on your lap, and we'll be all set. Are there any
Yes.
other things that we haven't